All right, so at this point, you've answered the pre-lab question, so your answers will be where it says answer here. And we're going to do the last part of this lab notebook that we need to complete before we begin the actual lab, and that's setting up our data tables. Okay, because when we start the lab, we're going to be collecting data and filling in these tables, so you really want to have them laid out ahead of time. First of all, it saves time. When you're doing the lab, you have some place to put the data, keep it organized. It also helps you establish to make sure you know what it is that you need to do, what are the data points that you need to gather in the lab, because if they're in the table, you need to be able to fill them in. So the data table kind of helps you preview what it is you're going to be collecting for data in the lab. For this data table, we're going to have a couple of things. There's what are called primary data tables, and then there are secondary data tables, which do include some calculations. So a primary data table is just measurements that are taken in the lab or observations that are made in the lab. There's no calculation, there's no analysis, that comes later. So these are just the data points that we collect when we put something on the digital balance, or we put something in a graduated cylinder, we record the measurement, and that's it. We're not doing any calculations at this point. As you can see down below, there's another section for calculations, then there's a section for analyzing the results of those calculations, and then finally there's a conclusion to the whole lab where we answer the original question that we asked in the purpose section. So for data tables, for the data collection, you may need multiple tables depending on what the lab is that you're doing, what is the data you're collecting, how many trials of things are you doing. In this case, we're going to have two primary data tables. We're going to have a table, a very small table, for collecting the data about the aluminum cylinder, and then we're going to have a slightly bigger data table for collecting the information about the squares of aluminum foil. First thing that you need to do is each table needs a title. So, and just data table is not a good enough title. It needs to explain a little bit about what's going on in the table itself. So for the first one, we're going to call this aluminum cylinder, and we're going to insert a table. Go up to insert at the top, table. For this table, we're going to need 3 columns and 2 rows. So we move it so that we've highlighted 3 across and 2 down, and it says 3 by 2, and we click and it inserts a table for us. So the first row is going to be the headings that explains what we're going to include in the data. It also includes the units and the level of uncertainty that we're going to have in our measurements based on the instruments that we're using. So for example, the first column is going to say volume of water. This is the volume that's going to be in the graduated cylinder. And we're going to be using a cylinder like the one on the left here. And it has markings at every 1 milliliter. So the unit is milliliters. The uncertainty, because we're going to be estimating at the 10th in between the ones here. So our uncertainty, it's in milliliters, is the unit. And it is plus or minus, and we're going to go up here and insert a special character. Click on where it says arrows, go to math, and we need to find the plus minus right here. Click on it, and then you can close this little window. Plus or minus 0.1, okay, because the uncertainty that we're estimating is the 10th of a milliliter. So the next column is going to be volume of water and aluminum cylinder. So this is what the reading is going to be after we've inserted the cylinder to the aluminum cylinder to the graduated cylinder, and it's going to be the same unit, milliliters, plus or minus. We can copy and paste this symbol, plus or minus 0.1. And then finally, the last measurement we need to take for the aluminum cylinder is the mass. The mass is going to be in grams, and the balance that we're going to be using is measures to the 100th of a gram. And since we're not estimating, but the balance is an estimate, we're going to say it's plus or minus 0.01. Okay, because it's we're estimating it could be rounded up or down, we're not sure. So we're saying that that's the estimated digit. So that's our aluminum cylinder data table. And then we're going to have our second primary data table, which is the aluminum squares. For this one, we're going to need a little bit bigger table because there's multiple squares. So we're going to insert a table, and it's going to be, this one is 4 columns wide and 6 rows high. So 4 by 6, select, and then the first column is the aluminum foil square. And this is going to be a numbered list. We can just go ahead and fill it in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 squares. The first column is length. And I'm going to leave the unit and the uncertainty blank for now because I want you guys to fill this in when we do the actual lab. I showed you how to do it with the volume of the cylinder, and I explained how it works with the mass. When we do the length width measurements, I want you to fill in the units and the uncertainty here based on what you see in the lab. So length, width, and mass. Okay, those are the 3 pieces of data that we're going to collect on the aluminum squares. Now we've filled in the data tables. The sections we have left are the ones that we're going to need to do once we've done the lab, once we've collected the data. After that, we can do our calculations, we can conduct our analysis, and we can draw a conclusion. So that's the part of this that has to happen after you've actually done the lab, which is the next class period. So I'm going to go and I'm going to delete the data checklist because we've done that section now. And then the last thing I want you to do is go all the way back up to your table of contents and refresh, and you'll see what we've done. Okay, so click here, click refresh. And now you see we've got all the sections in here. We've got the subsections even, and all of them are indicated with their page numbers. And as we fill in more information, the page numbers will continue to build. Okay, so once you've done all this, I want you to go into the assignment on Google Classroom and just turn it in. Okay, you've already shared this document with me, so once you turn it in, I'll take that to mean that you're done with this part of the lab report. You've set up your notebook, you've done your sections and entered in all the information that we have so far in these videos, and that I'm going to go in and just take a review. I'll review your introduction and make comments. I'll check your pre-lab question answers and again make any comments or feedback that you might need before we do the lab. The next step in this process is to take a look at what you would actually see in the lab, record the data, and then do the calculations, analysis, and conclusions, which will finish this lab, and then you will have completed your first lab and your first digital lab report.